under the endless stretch of the Arizona sky. I rode into Red Creek at dusk, the weight of a lost past clinging to my bones like the dust that churned beneath my horse's hooves. This was a town carved from nothing, built by the kind of men who believed they could escape the ghosts of their own souls by burying them under the dirt. It didn't take me long to realize that Red Creek wasn't much different from every other town I'd passed through. It was a graveyard for the dreams of people who couldn't outrun the consequences of their choices. I'd left behind everything I once knew, wandering from one godforsaken place to the next, chasing an endless horizon, hoping the wind would carry me away from the memories that gnawed at my insides. I'd been a soldier once, a man who fought for something bigger than myself. But all that was behind me now, lost to a war that didn't care about the men it broke. I was just another man trying to survive. But something about Red Creek made me feel like I might be running toward something instead of away from it. I pulled my horse to a stop in front of the saloon, a crumbling structure that looked as if it had been put together with desperation and nails. The saloon sign swayed in the wind, creaking like the last breath of a dying animal. There wasn't much left in Red Creek, but I could already feel it, a certain pull, an energy that seemed to hum in the air. Something was about to happen here, something I couldn't avoid, no matter how much I wanted to. I dismounted, the weight of my rifle pressing against my back as I moved toward the saloon's rickety doors. The floorboards groaned under my boots, echoing like a warning as I stepped inside. The smell hit me first, the musk of whiskey and sweat, the scent of men who'd been trapped in this place for far too long. The air was thick, weighed down with tension, and every pair of eyes in the room turned toward me the moment I crossed the threshold. But it was the woman who held my gaze. She was standing at the bar, her back to me, her raven-black hair cascading down her back in thick waves. I could see the curve of her shoulders beneath the worn fabric of her dress, the way the light caught the edges of her hair like fire. Her name was Clara Blackwell, a woman whose very presence seemed to challenge everything this town stood for. The way she held herself told me she wasn't someone you could just look at and walk away from. She was a woman who had carved her place in this world, and damn it, she was going to keep it. The other one, Sarah Montgomery, leaned against the far wall, her blonde hair falling in soft curls that framed her face like a halo. But her eyes, sharp and cold, gave her away. She wasn't a saint. She had a hardness in her gaze, a fire that could burn through any man's resolve if you let it. I could feel the heat of their eyes on me, assessing me like they were already trying to figure me out. And maybe they had every right to. I wasn't here to make friends. I was here to get through another night without losing what little I had left. I moved toward the bar, my hand brushing the cold wood of the counter as I took a seat. The bartender, a thin man with a ragged face, eyed me warily. "You got a name, stranger?" he asked, his voice rough like gravel. "Jack," I muttered, trying to keep the irritation out of my tone. "Callahan." Clara's voice broke through the silence, like a whisper on the wind. "Ain't many like you around here," she said, her voice smooth as velvet, but carrying an edge that made me turn to her. Her eyes were dark, too dark, filled with something that made me feel like she could see right through me. "Don't get many like you either," I replied, my words clipped, trying to keep the wall I'd built between myself and the world intact. But she wasn't having it. "Funny," Clara said, a smirk playing at the corners of her lips. I was just thinking the same thing. I shifted uncomfortably in my seat, feeling the heat of her gaze burning through me. "Just passing through," I said, my voice low, trying to make it sound like the truth. "Could use a meal? Maybe a bed?" Nothing more. She leaned in, her gaze never leaving mine, and I felt a shiver run down my spine. "Nothing more?" she repeated, her voice soft, almost like she was toying with me. "This town's got a way of pulling people in, Jack. Makes you think you can escape, but it doesn't let go. It never does." I looked at Sarah then. She was watching us, her eyes calculating. It's like she was trying to figure out whether I was worth the trouble or just another fool with a broken heart and empty pockets. Her lips curled into a faint smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You're right," I muttered, leaning back in my seat. "I'm not here for anything but a place to rest. That's all." But Clara wasn't satisfied with that answer. She stood, moving closer, her boots clicking softly against the floor. Her presence enveloped me, and for a moment, I thought I could smell the faint scent of jasmine mixed with something earthy. Her hand brushed against mine as she leaned over the bar, close enough that I could feel the heat of her body against mine. "You're lying," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "You're here for more than that. Everyone in Red Creek is, whether they admit it or not." I swallowed, the weight of her words sinking deep into my chest. She was right. I wasn't just here for a bed or a meal. I was here because, somehow, this town was calling to me, dragging me into something bigger than myself, something that was going to change me forever. And then, like the snap of a twig in the dead of night, the door crashed open. A man walked in all broad-shouldered, wearing a black hat that shadowed his face. His boots thudded heavily against the floor, and I could feel the air change the moment he stepped inside. His name was Hector Blackstone, and he owned half this town. Every inch of him radiated power that would crush anyone who stood in his way. Behind him, the sheriff followed, his hand twitching near his gun. The tension in the room grew thick enough to cut through. Clara stood straighter, Sarah's eyes narrowed, and the man at the bar leaned forward, his gaze flicking between the two women in Blackstone. I could feel the threat in the air, heavy and suffocating. Blackstone wasn't here for a drink. He was here to take something I couldn't quite put my finger on yet. But I had a feeling I wasn't going to like what happened next. Well, Blackstone's voice was smooth, like syrup, but there was something in it that made me wary. "Look who's come crawling back to Red Creek." Clara didn't flinch. "You don't own me, Blackstone," she said, her voice cold, biting. "Not yet," he replied, his eyes flicking toward Sarah, then back to Clara. "But I will. And when I do, everything you have here will be mine." The air in the saloon crackled with the promise of violence. Clara didn't back down, her eyes locked with Blackstone's as if daring him to make his move. I knew what kind of man Blackstone was: ruthless, driven by greed, and hungry for control. And I also knew that the fight was coming, whether I wanted it or not. I stood up, my hand resting on the grip of my revolver. The cold steel a reminder that I wasn't just a man who ran from trouble anymore. I'd learned the hard way that sometimes you had to stand your ground. Blackstone smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "I didn't expect you to go down without a fight, Callahan," he said, his eyes narrowing. "I'm not your enemy," I said, stepping forward. "But I'm not going to let you take this town without a fight." Clara's gaze softened for a split second, but then her face hardened again. "This isn't just about the town, Jack," she said quietly. "This is about survival." The room went silent, and I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on us. The storm was coming, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to face it. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't running anymore. The sun had just dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the dry, cracked earth of Red Creek. The air was thick with the dust of a town slowly withering away. But for the first time in a long while, I could feel something stirring in my chest. Something that had been buried deep, hidden behind the pain of losing everything I'd once held dear. But as the stars began to pierce the darkening sky, I knew that tonight, things were going to change. For better or for worse, the saloon was quiet now. The tension from earlier, when Clara and Sarah had confronted Blackstone, out still hung like a storm cloud, thick and suffocating, but I could feel that same weight pressing on my chest now. Not from the threat of Blackstone's return, but from something I couldn't shake, something I wasn't ready to face. "Jack," Clara's voice called out softly, her tone more delicate than I'd expected. I turned to face her, finding her standing by the window, the silhouette of her form framed by the pale moonlight. "What is it?" I asked, my voice rough, betraying the confusion and unease I felt. I wasn't sure what she wanted from me, or why I was still here in this damned town. She didn't speak at first, her eyes drifting to the distance outside the window. Then, with a slight sigh, she stepped closer, the sound of her boots soft against the worn floorboards. "You've been running from something, Jack," she said, her voice soft but piercing, as if she were trying to see into the very depths of my soul. "We all have." I wasn't sure what she meant by that, but as she took a step closer, I could feel the weight of her words, the unspoken truth in her eyes. She was right. I had been running for years. running from my past, from the loss, from the betrayal. But there was something about this place, about Clara, that made me feel like I was being pulled back into something I couldn't escape. "I don't want to talk about it," I muttered, trying to push past the pain, the memories that swirled inside me like a hurricane. I turned away, not able to face her or what I was starting to feel. She was silent for a long moment, but I could feel her presence behind me, her gaze unwavering. "You don't have to tell me, Jack," she said quietly, "but you're not alone anymore." I clenched my fists, fighting against the pull in my chest. I didn't want to need anyone, not after everything that had happened, but there was something about her, something in the way she held herself, in the way she understood the weight of this broken town, that made me want to believe her. I turned back to face her, my heart pounding in my chest. "What do you want from me, Clara?" I asked, my voice gruffed with the weight of everything I had been hiding. She took another step forward, her eyes never leaving mine. "I want you to stay, Jack," she said softly. "I want you to help us fight back against Blackstone. This town needs you." "And so do I," her words hung in the air, heavy and charged with an emotion I couldn't yet name. I had always been a loner, a man who preferred to face his battles alone. But as I stood there, looking into her eyes, something deep within me stirred. A part of me that had been buried under layers of grief and anger, a part of me that still remembered how to care. I didn't answer right away. My mind raced, torn between the man I had been and the man I was starting to become. But before I could speak, I heard the unmistakable sound of hooves approaching from outside. The door creaked open and a figure entered, casting a long shadow across the room. Max Harrison. I hadn't expected to see him tonight or ever again. He stood in the doorway, tall and broad-shouldered, his silhouette framed by the dim light from outside. His face was a mix of ruggedness and weariness, his eyes carrying the burden of a past that had caught up with him. He was a man whose reputation had preceded him, notorious outlaw who had carved a bloody path through the West. But tonight, he didn't look like the man I remembered. He was different, softer, almost. But the darkness in his eyes told me that redemption wasn't something he could escape so easily. "What do you want, Harrison?" I asked, my voice low and filled with suspicion. I had no love for outlaws, not after everything I'd lost because of men like him. Max's gaze flicked to Clara, then to Sarah, before finally landing on me. "I'm here to make amends," he said, his voice rough but tinged with something that sounded almost sincere. "I've spent years running from my past, and now I'm trying to do right by it." I didn't trust him, not for a second. Outlaws didn't change. They never did. But there was something in his voice, something in the way he stood there, that made me pause. "What do you want from us?" Sarah asked, her tone guarded but curious. She had always been the one to ask the hard questions. "To cut through the bullshit. I want to help," Max said simply, stepping further into the room. "I know you're all fighting Blackstone, and I know I'm the last person you want to ask for help. But I've got men, and I've got resources. I can make sure he doesn't take this town." I didn't know what to make of it. A former outlaw offering his help. It didn't add up. But then again, neither did Clara's offer of help. Neither did the way this town, this broken, dying place, seemed to pull me in like a magnet. "I don't believe you," I said, my voice tight. "You're just as bad as Blackstone. You've caused enough damage already." Max's face hardened, but his eyes softened for just a moment. "I don't expect you to trust me," he said quietly, "but sometimes redemption comes at a price, and I'm willing to pay it. For you, for this town." I was silent, torn between disbelief and the faintest glimmer of hope. Could a man like him really change? Or was this just another trick, another trap I was walking right into? Before I could say anything more, a loud crash echoed from outside, followed by the sound of boots stomping through the dirt. The tension in the room exploded, and I turned toward the door just as Blackstone's men stormed in. Guns drawn, eyes cold. "Looks like you've made your choice." "Callahan," Blackstone sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. "You're either with me, or you're dead." I stood there, my hand resting on the grip of my revolver, my heart pounding in my chest. This was it, the moment I had been dreading. But as I looked at Clara, at Sarah, and even Max, something shifted in me. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about fighting for something greater. For justice. For love. For redemption, and I wasn't going to let Blackstone take that away from me. The room erupted into chaos as the gunfight began. I fired first, my shots echoing through the saloon, the sound of gunfire a sharp reminder of the world we lived in. But as the smoke cleared, I knew one thing for sure. This was just the beginning in this fight. We were more than just survivors. We were fighters, and we would do whatever it took to take back our town, to take back our lives, to find redemption.
We fight, or we die.